Chapter 36. Before any of my patients were in any condition to push a lawnmower, the neighbors of our Holgate house called to complain. The lawn was overgrown, and our tenants were throwing wild parties. I had suspected that problems were brewing. The rent was overdue. I went in one day to investigate, and as I was leaving, I was waved down by a man of medium stature in a pantsuit of medium shade. The only thing colorful about him was his protruding abdomen, which was pushing his belt down so far it looked like a G-string. He introduced himself as a developer, explaining that he had an option to buy vacant land adjacent to and behind our house, and needed our space to make a package to build apartments on. As he rattled on, his hands, which he kept in his pockets, kept moving as if the motion was all that was keeping his pants up. I didn't like him, and I wasn't quite sure why, except that I had a hard time looking him in the eye. I discussed it with Corey that evening, not the belt buckle. Did we want to sell? Just saying the words filled me with nostalgia. We had come to love the old house. One of its great assets was the layout. In fact, in all our books of house plans, we never found any that we liked better. We often wished we could move the house out to the valley and set it on the high point of the property. With the wonderful view of Mount Hood, Corey said wistfully. With all the wonderful room? I said. Looking back, I don't understand why it took me so long to realize that the solution was quite simple. But of course I was looking in the wrong direction. And when one goes in the wrong direction, it takes a long time to get there. The next day, Mr. Buckle called. I told him we had decided not to sell. His sweet tone dissolved, and he sounded as if my words were a rebuke, as if we owed him. He ranted until I hung up, but we were not through with him. The next day, I was at Holgate mowing the lawn when he came over, his hands in his pockets, shifting his pants into place. Once again, I had a hard time looking at him, but he purred like a kitten. Wouldn't we please sell? Pretty please. I repeated our decision. He became more of a snarling dog. Well then, would we be interested in selling the 1/4 acre behind our house? I discussed it with Corey. He reasoned, yeah, apartments in that area will devalue our property, so if they are going to build them anyway, maybe we should sell the back lot, and we'll still have a good rental, and money to put into our house here in the valley. I agreed. And whatever he offers, I'll double the price. When I submitted a figure, Mr. Buckle sounded like he was having a major stroke. I'd better be realistic, he barked, and I had only until August. By August, our world had returned to near normal. Olav, walking with the help of a cane, had overstayed his visa and gone back to Canada. Corey was back at work. All the kids were getting ready to go back to school. Sig would be going to Clackamas High with Freya. Eric would be starting 1st grade at Happy Valley School. The prospect of being alone every day in an empty house caused me to pause and consider. What was I going to do with my time? Go out and buy another batch of chickens? Fight Goaty off the kitchen table? I shuddered at the thought. I felt a need to be real. Was I a bona fide animal lover? Or had I simply enjoyed picturing myself as a down-to-earth individual providing for her family by digging in the soil? I'd never had a passion for our only milk cow, Nellie. When she contracted milk fever and had to be butchered, I experienced no heart pangs, certainly not the kind that Jean Thompson would have felt. The pig was also butchered without many tears. Indeed, we raised a piglet, albeit not very successfully. According to Arlo, our mistake had been forcing Perky Pig to be a loner. Despite consuming ample high-protein table scraps, the poor guy practically wasted down to his ham hocks from solitary confinement. In all my soul-searching, I had to admit that animal husbandry had been a lark. I was tired of larks. And as far as sifting soil was concerned, I had worn out both my thumbs. I had great respect for those whose true calling came from the barnyard and the garden patch, but I was not one of them. I just wanted to get back to being me. And I suspected the rest of the family felt the same way. The horses hadn't been ridden regularly. The goat was a pest. The chickens were wandering. One day, as if to verify my thinking, Bill, Saudi's original owner, came by. He had never given up his desire to have her back. I told him that Arlo wanted to buy her. Bill made an even better deal. He offered to buy Flicka too. I accepted the deal. When it came to our bearded, horned, ruminant mammal, it was more complicated. There was a long list of painful lessons we'd learned from Goaty, and frankly, everyone in the family was sick to death of him, most especially Eric. One day, he appeared with a pencil and a piece of stationery. I'm going to make a sign and put it up in front of the house. How do you spell goat? I helped him finish the sign, goat for sale. He posted it, but alas, he had no buyers. In fact, not even one inquiry. Then came the calamity that was to seal Goaty's fate. Freya, her friend Marcia, and I, with the dubious help of Eric, were painting the shop. The only mishap I had anticipated was Eric knocking over the paint, which, because I couldn't find the exact color at the paint store, I had mixed myself, a dash of this, a squirt of that. I thought I'd mixed plenty, but by the time we got to the last side, we were running low. Be careful, I warned Freya and Marcia. Don't fill your brushes so full that they drip. Don't set the buckets on the scaffold where you'll stumble over them. And Eric, you come with me to the house. You've done enough painting. Yes, Mother. Freya displayed the tolerance of a 14-year-old who knows enough not to deliberately upset paint pails. Before Eric and I got to the house, we heard screams and rushed back. There was Gody, with a bucket of paint on his horns, showering himself with red paint. And there, just as you'd expect, was the other bucket, dripping the last of its contents down the white railing of the shop porch. I wrestled Gody all the way to his swivel chain, and by that time concluded that the final solution was up to me. But how? I considered putting him in the garbage can like I'd done with Sick Chick, but I wasn't sure I wanted to risk brooding another demon. I thought of digging a big hole out back of the barn and trying to coax him to stay while I filled it up. I told Corey about that, and of course, he offered a story from Norway about a goat who fell into a sewer. The unfortunate farmer couldn't get him out, so he began throwing in shovels full of dirt, which the goat tramped on, making a progressively higher platform. Finally, he was able to climb out. But now the goat smelled so bad that the farmer dug the sewer out again and threw the goat back in. As a last resort, I considered sneaking Gody back to Dr. Ladd's house under the cover of darkness, returning him to where he came from. Surely a doctor would know more about handling such matters than I did. Besides, it would serve Dr. Ladd right. He never seemed to remember us no matter how many times we had visited his office. Then Arlo came up with an address. It was on the other side of Portland, a long way to go, but according to Arlo, the only place that took goats. I waited for a day that only Freya and I were home. I knew that I couldn't ask for Sig's help. He was too soft-hearted, and Gody was his own special pet. We had a devil of a time getting him into the car. I was pulling on his horns and calling for Freya's help. Her response shocked me. Why don't you call for Dr. Ladd to push on his rear end? The entire trip was a driving nightmare. Gody kept pawing at the upholstery, determined to climb into the front seat. Every curve in the road sent him tumbling around like a fly trapped in a mayonnaise jar. To make matters worse, we hit every stoplight downtown. As we waited for each signal to change, Gody shoved his head out the barely cracked window and let out agonized bleats. Pedestrians stopped in their tracks, gawking at his red face, certain they were witnessing an undeniable case of animal cruelty. Finally, we arrived at the slaughterhouse. Spotting a stooped old man in black, I called out for directions. His gesture was hard to interpret, but soon a burly fellow appeared and hoisted Gody out of the car. Before I could change my mind, Gody had disappeared. Freya and I cried all the way home. What was that man in black doing there? Freya asked. Well, I'm not sure, but I think that he was a rabbi, and I think that Gody is now kosher. Freya startled me with her knowledge. Oh, I know what that is. It means that according to Jewish dietary laws, Gody is now ritually pure. I found comfort in the word pure.